Hi friends, I am Jen and this is Paul. And this video is on down dog for stiff people. And Paul is the stiff person here. So Paul, what would you say have been the most useful tips you got for improving your down dog as a stiff person?
Well, number one is 15 years of practice. Outside of that, I think that using blocks and being creative in a lot of the straight-legged forward fold postures from primary series has been really useful. So we'll talk a little bit about some ideas.
All right, well let's take a look at down dog first. So Paul is fairly open now in down dog, but Paul, can you first demonstrate what down dog might look like if on a stiff person?
Oh boy. Okay, so let's rewind to about 2006 and let's try to recreate the 2006 down dog.
And probably a little bit more forward with your shoulders. So one of the things I notice a lot when people are stiff is that the shoulders are more over the wrists in down dog, and maybe even more than you are now, Paul. Like the down dog tends to be really forward for students who are stiff and new to down dog. And what this does is it puts a ton of tension in the upper body, and a posture like down dog starts to feel more like a plank and more arduous than you want it to be, because eventually down dog, the body weight should be fairly evenly distributed between the legs and the upper body, the back, and we consider it full body integration. So everything is ideally kind of spread out, and you can see that Paul just made that adjustment. But that's rarely the case when somebody's new to down dog. Usually it really looks short, like Paul just did, and you can see how closely over his wrists his shoulders are, which just brings a ton of body weight into the upper body, and it makes down dog feel really, really difficult.
It's exhausting. It's awful. I hate it.
So what are the things that you remember about down dog when you were new to it?
You just can't do it. Like, it's this torturous position, and everybody else is elegant and lithe and graceful, and you're the one person in the room, and you're shaking, and your arms hurt, and this doesn't feel like it's useful. And it's not useful because when I'm in that position, there's no ease, there's no sukha in any of it. And B, I can't stretch anything. You can't stretch your shoulders, they're just kind of bunched up. And you can't stretch your hamstrings, your knees are bent, and there's no stretch here. So it's not a useful posture. It's not doing anything for you.
Okay, can you go back to the down dog really quickly?
Good down dog or
just a bad down dog. So one of the things that happens when people are new is the down dog's kind of short, the heels are lifted, which is fine, but the hamstrings are so tight that it pulls the pelvis down, and that rounds the back and makes it really difficult to pull the weight of the body up and back. So I always instruct new students to bend the knees right away, because that does help to make more space here. Paul does not find that to be particularly useful, but I have worked with a number of students who find that helpful, because as soon as the knee's bent, you're able to kind of start pulling things up and back more, and that is the direction that this part of the body is moving in down dog. So that's one basic instruction that does help a lot of people, but probably more useful than that, Paul, would you say, is hands-on blocks? Is that where you would go from here?
So a long stance is critical. A lot of people have this idea that a good down dog means your heels on the floor.
And let me interrupt you for a second. I would say a long stance is critical for flexible people too. Yes. I would just encourage everyone to go longer in their downward facing dog.
Finding space through blocks is one of the cornerstones of my practice. So I really like these chunky cork blocks because they're dense enough and they're strong enough to withstand a lot of weight on them. Foam blocks are terrible. Don't use those unless they're extremely dense foam blocks. So as soon as you grab two blocks and you take a long stance on a short mat, unfortunately, you can start finding length.
So you see now his feet are way further back, and he's also able to create more space for his upper body to start to really take things up and back and get that diagonal line in the back. We're also looking for more space here in the shoulders. So, less rounding, less pushing, less muscle, and more length and space. So that is a really great thing for people who are stiff to down dog to start working on. An important thing for people to let go of in down dog is this idea that the heels have to be down. So Paul, when you put your heels down, what happens?
Well, I have to walk my feet in a lot, and so I can get my heels down. And so congratulations, I win the trophy because I have a down dog with my heels on the floor. But this just entirely removes my hamstrings from the equation. Like you can see that my lower back is rounding, and it doesn't feel very good. It's just not a very productive dog.
So when he steps back,
then I step back a foot.
The heels float, which is fine, and everything gets longer.
So the shoulders get longer, hamstrings get longer, calves get longer, Achilles get longer. So this is kind of my preferred down dog right here.
Yeah, and he's doing a really nice job keeping everything engaged and finding length at the same time.
If you're really stiff, if you're new to the practice, I remember spending years doing one-legged dogs, just simply floating one foot at a time, particularly before practice. Like on a really stiff morning, it's cold, it's winter, I'm 22, it's a long time ago. And then just alternating, right? You can also like press with your other foot and like try to get into your calf here. One particular instruction that I do like is to try to work your down dog with both heels at the same time. So rather than spending a lot of time doing elaborate variations of dog, like try to really get weight back into both legs at the same time, lifting your kneecaps, like really driving your heels down and like finding strength in length here. And so elevating the hands and driving both heels down and getting used to, finding stability and length in this position is quite helpful.
Do you find grabbing the edges of the mat to be helpful?
Edges of the mat?
Like holding on here and pulling?
Oh.
Because I know some people like that.
I mean, the longer your stance, the more your hands will start sliding away from you. If you have a decent mat, I've never had any issue with that.
Yes, no, maybe?
Maybe.
So this might be something worth experimenting.
You can also put your blocks against the wall and focus on like pushing so hard that the blocks would otherwise go sliding away, which is probably a similar experience.
Why don't we show that? I'll cut the video again because I think actually maybe grab other blocks too just to show people how to set up for that. And then one last thing, we want to show you how you would set up using the blocks at the wall. So if you find that your blocks are sliding away from you, I would suggest you just take them to the wall. And Paul, you find that you can push a lot more into the blocks here?
So if your blocks are moving away, it can be an interesting way to like do a workshop down dog exploration. Here I've stacked 2 sets of blocks so that the main blocks are far enough away from the wall where there's space for me to move. But they're firmly anchored in that they can't move because the wall's in the way. And so here, very, very large blocks would serve a similar purpose. But here you can really focus on pushing forward rather than down and trying to find as much length as possible through your legs and through your shoulders and through your spine.
And then just pause 1 second. So you can see here, his sit bones can kind of angle up here. He's got the pelvis in a better position. The backs of the legs are obviously opening a lot, and he's got a space through his shoulders, so he's really finding length with the upper body using the blocks. Okay. Anything else to add?
Practice.